Yesterday was a massive day for the ACC, for college football in general, and then, of course, for the Clemson Tigers, and, of course, the Florida State Seminoles as well. Clemson filed a lawsuit in South Carolina against the ACC. In doing so, they admitted that the ACC made a major mistake against Florida State. I'll get to that in just a moment. But first, let's talk quickly about Clemson filing. I talked about this on our national channel. I've tweeted about this some, but we've covered conference realignment here for over a year. And so, of course, we were going to do a video and talk about this and give a little perspective. Number one, I think it's really good for FSU to have an ally in this. And I think they always had a couple of silent allies. I think they always had a couple of people that you would think like are on their side or on their team, probably thinking the way that they think, but maybe just not as vocal. And though Florida State took a lot of that media brunt, a lot of that media hit, it was good for somebody else to finally step up to the plate. I don't think that this is necessarily a time to squabble with Clemson or Clemson fans or folks at that university about their timing. I think their timing was very strategic. You can love that. You can hate that. It doesn't really matter. It's all out in the air now. And I get it. I feel like Florida State fans probably feel, hey, we took all of the negativity around this for months, and now you guys are going to skate by free. Who cares? That's not important. Doesn't matter. What matters now is that we are all kind of moving forward to get out of this conference. I truly do believe, and you guys may roll your eyes at this, but I truly do believe that public perception and public pressure matters a lot. And I think that there were a lot of people after the snub that were saying, listen, I am not going to donate another cent to the boosters if they don't get us out of this conference. I am not going to do this, do that if Florida State cannot find a way to get out. And I'm not saying that that's why they filed or that's why this happened, that, but I do think public pressure matters. And so if you're saying, oh, well, what do you mean we just need to work together? I think that what you do as a community, Clemson fans, Florida State fans, UNC fans, Miami fans that may watch this, I do think it matters. I'm not saying it's the final factor. I do think it determines a few things. Clemson fans watching this, do not be surprised about the attacks that you will now get from the conference and some of the media. There are people who work for the ACC media, who work for ESPN, who are corporate shills, who literally will make you look like the bad guy for doing this, who will question whether or not you eventually get out. There are people who will absolutely toe the company line for ESPN, for the ACC, for the networks, because that's what they get paid to do. And that will be the narrative coming out of ESPN right now. Don't be surprised by that. It's happened to Florida State for months now. It will happen to you too. It's not a big deal. Let it roll off your back. You're about to be free. Who cares? So what's next? Genetics56 on Twitter posted the following. He said, now comes the question. Was it the Big Ten or the SEC that gave the move ahead to file it? It should be of zero surprise to anyone that the lawsuit was filed 2 days after the college football contract was signed. Power 2, P2, equals authority. Is it Big Ten or SEC? That is the question now. He brings up a phenomenal point. The college football playoff was a huge part of this. Clemson had been getting ready to go on this. They didn't file this thing within 2 days. We told you that they were getting ready, but this was the final straw. We talked about this back in August when we said we weren't going to do any more conference realignment videos until Florida State filed. We talked about this in December when Florida State filed. We told you in late December that we were hearing that Clemson was getting ready to go. We talked about it again in January on both this channel and the national channel, which we are going to link at the end of the video, so stay tuned for that. But we talked about that for months. It's not a surprise that Clemson is up and ready to go. It's not a surprise, but I do think they were waiting to see how playoff talks went, how revenue distribution went, and this was certainly the final straw that broke the camel's back. Clemson filed before the ACC could. That's a big-time move for them. That's massive. Florida State didn't have that advantage. The ACC rushed to the courthouse. You guys know that. We've talked with Doug of Rohan Law about it. But it's a big move for Clemson to be able to file first. It doesn't necessarily matter who wins here. If a judge declares that Florida State is good to go and they can get out, Clemson will get out. If a judge declares that Clemson can get, then Florida State will go too. It doesn't really matter. You need to be rooting for them. Clemson fans, you need to be rooting that Florida State gets out. 1 out of 2 here does the job. 0 out of 2, not great. But back to what Genetics said. Is it the Big Ten or the SEC? He's implying at that moment that Clemson would not have filed this had they not gotten a hat tip, a wink, a little bit of a suggestion from someone at one of those conferences or someone with a network associated with those conferences that like, hey, you've got a spot. Why do you think other programs haven't filed? Probably because they don't have a certified certain landing spot. Now, what did Clemson say that the ACC messed up on? I'll get to that in just a moment. Before I do that, let me give a little bit of love to our friends over at gotspears.com. Listen, the spring game is just a couple of weeks away. Spring practice has started, and if you are looking for a new 6-foot spear, or even if you're not looking but you want a great deal, you can order one for $100 right now. It's a spring game special. We'll link it in the description. You have to order it online. You can't just go there the day of the spring game and pick it up. If you do that, it's going to be regular price. These are being made by his rush order team. Make sure that you get your spear up there in Tallahassee for the spring game. Let us know in the comments if you go get one. We've had some people say, hey, we are looking for our spears. Make sure that you message John there. His contact information is on the website. Go reach out to him, and he will get you taken care of. Again, get your $100 spear, save $50, save on the shipping, save on the weight if you get it on the spring game special. Pick it up at the spring game. Appreciate John at gotspears.com for his support. Ross Dellinger posted this. He said, in court documents, Clemson claims that the ACC did not hold a vote requesting that its members, including Clemson, approve of the lawsuit against Florida State. Nor has Clemson ever authorized the ACC's lawsuit against FSU. Clemson is on Team Florida State. I think this is pretty special that they went ahead and called the ACC out here. They said, listen, the ACC did not do what they were legally supposed to do. They did not do what their own bylaws say. They did not do what the ACC Constitution said. They did not do and follow their own rules. Therefore, their lawsuit against Florida State is not even valid. Their lawsuit against Florida State is completely wrong. We've talked about that a ton with Doug. You guys know that. But for Clemson to literally put that in their lawsuit, to file that in a legal dispute is a big deal. It shows what side they're on. It shows what they know to be right. It also shows the ACC's missteps. It shows how the ACC has screwed up. And hopefully, that's not going to help Florida State's case at all. The judge is not going to consider that in Florida State's case unless that gets submitted as evidence or as an argument in the courtroom. But it is a big deal for Clemson to have called it out and bring to the very forefront of their case, here's a massive misstep by the ACC. I think what this all leads to is it all leads to a quicker settlement. I think the ACC knows that it's dead in the water. I think they know they have zero chance. Maybe they had a chance of pulling an upset against Florida State. Maybe they'd have a chance one-off against Clemson. But both things going at the same time, there is no chance that they can win this. And so I think it leads to a settlement, and a settlement probably rather quick. There is strength in numbers. I know that's a cliche, but I do think that it's a big deal that Florida State and Clemson are now doing this together. You have two powers that have held this conference up for the last 20-plus years. Really farther than that if you go back to Bowden. You have two powers that have held this conference up for a long time, and they are going to be the ones that bring it down. I think we end up seeing an announcement of some kind, not necessarily a settlement, but maybe an announcement of an intention to leave by Florida State and or Clemson before the season starts. I think you're going to have a lot more clarity on this before we get to Dublin. I think the ACC also made another pretty massive misstep. I spoke about that on our national channel. It has more to do with the Clemson angle. If you haven't checked that channel out, I'm going to link it on screen right now. We're going to keep covering this on both this channel and the national one. Florida State focused here, more national stuff over there. Click the video on the screen right now to go watch it. Thank you guys, and go Noles.